Before we start today's episode, a bit of housekeeping for all those listeners out there. Whichever your podcast listening platform of choice, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, reviews can make a huge difference. Not only do we value your feedback, which can help us create better content, but it will also help others discover the podcast. So spread the love and leave a review if you've got a minute. And with that, on with today's show. I'm the Reverend Dr. Jenny McKay, veterinarian and minister in secular employment, environmentalist, activist, and self-confessed cat junkie. But believe it or not, I have never been a guest on a podcast with a Reverend Vet. Someone who has is my first ever returning guest, Angela Richens. Hello again, Angela. Thanks for speaking with us today. Lovely to have you back on the show again. And can I start by asking what you've been up to since your first appearance on the podcast back in April 2022?
First of all, hello, Jenny, and anybody that's listening. And now, just to answer your questions, each summer I've had an operation, a gallbladder out in July 2022, and a knee replacement last year, and last week a cataract operation. So I guess in one way I'm becoming a new person. But seriously, most of my time has been devoted to writing my book, producing videos for Facebook and then YouTube, keeping my dog club going, and I've now gone back to being a lay minister at my local church. So that's what I've been up to.
That's great. And I'm really hoping that those operations have gone successfully for you, Angela, as well. But as you said, you've been busy writing this book, and I've got a copy of it myself. It's right in front of me, and it's called Pray, Read and Reflect. So would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about the book and your experience writing it?
Well, this is, as I'm sure Jenny has said, is my first book. It took me 4 years to write, and in a minute I'm going to tell you why. But first of all, a little bit about the book. The book is in two parts. The first is how to read the Bible, and the second part, which is much longer, is how to pray. It's not that easy to describe. The book is a bit like an encyclopedia and also a bit like a how-to-do-it manual with simple instructions. It's designed to be a book that you can dig and delve into. But again, it's also a bit of an autobiography because I include so many personal stories. And also, it's a bit like a journal because there's suggestions, questions, and activities at the end of each chapter. So you really need to get the book to see what it's all about. Mm-hmm. It's really written for the person who doesn't normally read books, or at least theological books. It doesn't give the reader all the answers, but as I said, tips and suggestions to get them searching for themselves. I've deliberately written it in an easy-to-read, chatty style, using sort of simple vocabulary, so the ordinary man in the street, or I think I should probably say man or woman in the pew, can read it and can read and enjoy and get something from it. It includes different styles of prayer, praying in the church meeting, praying with children, praying on Zoom, and so much more. And the same with a section about reading the Bible. There's all sorts of subjects which are not usually tackled. But to get back to your question, really, I'm going to just start at the beginning. It was the start of the first COVID lockdown in 2020, and my husband, who I had been caring for, had sadly passed away. I was a licensed lay minister in the Church of England, St Andrews in Walcott, and the churches had now closed, so I had time on my hands. I wrote a short series of Bible studies called Paul in Lockdown, which I shared on Facebook Live, but when I realised that not many church members had access to the internet or wanted to read the internet, I had copies printed and distributed. And then in the summer, I decided I would write a second study, and I felt I would write about how to read the Bible, and later on I started on how to pray. But COVID dragged on, the study got longer, and 4 years later, it had become a full-size book. So at age 77, after writing in one form or another since very early childhood, my dream of becoming an established author, well, I say established, published author, had finally come to fruition. With the help of an established Christian author, it was published on Amazon in Kindle and paperback form. During the years I was writing it, I had the operations I told you about, and also went through a period of depression and anxiety. Many times I would give up writing for a while, saying nobody would want to buy a book from an unknown elderly woman. But despite encouragement from friends, I know that I suffered from imposter syndrome, feeling that I was just pretending to be a writer and wasn't really at all. But there was always a little voice inside my head telling me to keep on writing and not give up. And I'm so pleased I listened to that voice. And I'm also so grateful for the group of friends who've encouraged me to keep on going. And yeah, it's a book. If you do want to buy it, I do hope one or two of you listening will buy it. Is £2.99 the Kindle version on Amazon and £9.99 for the paperback. Well, that's my journey of writing the book.
Wow. And I've got the book as I said, and it's definitely worth a read. And as Angela said, it's really for people who are not deeply theological. And I've got to say, people like myself, even though I'm the Reverend Vet, I much prefer to have things explained very simply, because sometimes we make things too complicated, don't we, Angela?
Yeah.
And also prayer. People are quite frightened on, the right way to pray or the proper way to pray. And each person has to find their own way to pray.
Yeah.
So I think it's wonderful. You were inspired and you kept going through difficult times, and the output has been really fantastic. So did you find, Angela, when you were researching and writing the book, did it lead to any new self-discoveries about your own praying habits or the ways in which you practice your faith in general?
Yes, definitely. Mainly through research in other traditions, which I was less familiar with. And several times I felt challenged because as I was writing it, obviously I felt that God was speaking to me as well. So it did challenge me. And also having to think about and face up to mistakes that I made, things what didn't work, because I've included one or two times where things didn't quite work out as planned, just to encourage readers. And also I believed it was important to be honest. And it was also good to look back on my faith journey and ask myself questions like, what do I believe about this? What has helped me about this? Who has helped me? Writing my book, I think, also made me more dependent on the support of others, particularly when I got discouraged and felt I was on my own. So I set up a little group on Messenger, and I kept these half a dozen people updated and let them have, and I gave them prayer requests that they could pray for me. And I must say that, Jenny, you were one of the ones that was a great encouragement to me.
Oh,
So little
thank you.
thanks, Jenny.
Thank
But
you.
many times I just kind of felt that I was under attack, particularly with my health and that. But in hindsight, I feel that I was involved in a spiritual battle, but a word of encouragement always came to help me in one way or another. And yeah, I just started writing a second book, Look, Listen and Learn, and feeling far more confident that it's not going to take me 4 years to finish.
No, because we'll be really looking to hear what your second book is all about. And I know we're going to discuss that later on in the podcast. But that it's such an encouragement, I'm sure, to everybody who's listening, who's maybe got a dream or a project and they just feel they don't have the resources or the reserve to keep on going. But, when something is important to do, you must hang on to your faith and keep going.
Yeah.
So I think your message is very encouraging to the listeners, Angela.
And you do need to find people that will support you.
You do. You do. You cannot do it alone, can you?
Yeah, they may not be the people that you would traditionally turn to. I found one or two people from Facebook have been so encouraging, and yet I don't even know
You
them that
don't know.
well.
Yeah,
But then, anyway, let's get back to answering the
absolutely.
questions.
But your book, it mentioned that you've been a Christian for over 50 years now. So can you tell me about your first memories of connecting with your faith? Or was there ever
Well,
like a eureka moment when you knew you were following the right path, or was it more natural?
well, in hindsight, I could see that there had been different times where I had become a bit more interested, or where I felt, oh, where God was calling me, but I didn't realize it until afterwards. So it really seemed as if there was one big moment, although I know God was working in my life before then. But this big moment came when I'd been going through a really bad time and I was on antidepressants. And it's actually a long, and I won't go into all the things which had gone wrong, but it was a very, very difficult time in my life. And I was at my sister in law's house feeling really down. And she was a Christian, but I didn't really take much notice of whatever she had to say to me. But this time I overheard her talking in the kitchen about a young man who'd been left blind and paralyzed from meningitis. And she spoke about this young man to her friend and said that he had told her all that she'd been told, that he'd said that although he'd lost his spiritual sight, his natural sight, he'd found his spiritual sight. And
Mhm.
I just couldn't understand this. I thought this was ridiculous that any person would feel that way after having such a tragedy in their life. But when I got home, I think I must have been thinking about it because I can't explain why, but I started looking at a collection of little texts I'd been given at Sunday school when I was about 5 or 6 with little Bible verses on these pictures.
Oh.
And I was just kind of like thinking about what she had been saying.
Hmm.
And it was when I went to bed that night. John had been working nights. I remember feeling very confused. I was quite suicidal then. I had wanted to die because I didn't want to live. But I lay there fearing what dying was like and thinking I didn't want to live and I didn't want to die. And it's a very confusing feeling. And then I say I prayed, but it was almost as if I was talking to myself, if that makes sense. And I kind of just sort of said,
Hmm.
whether out loud or in my mind, I'm not sure. I was confused. But I just said, I wish I had that faith that Vincent has. And then I had this picture of Jesus in my mind. It wasn't any kind of vision out there. It was just like the kind of mental pictures you get when you're daydreaming a little bit. But it was very vivid of Jesus, and Jesus when he was going to the cross.
Gosh.
And the words came to me, it isn't faith you need, but Jesus. And I thought, why did I think that? But I thought, yes. And that was the beginning. I was
Wow.
healed and changed overnight, but I know it doesn't always work this way, not with everybody. It's just the way in which God was working with me. And then God started sorting me out and changing things in my life and teaching me and sharing where I should start reading in the Bible. And it began from that moment. It wasn't a very long prayer. It was just a realization, really. And John said that he could tell us that something had happened to me, even though I didn't realize I'd changed. He said it was because I'd stopped swearing. And this was something I never realized. I didn't realize I used to swear. And he said, yes, you were swearing all the time. And I
Ah,
don't. So I, yeah, sometimes people can see that we've changed, even if we can't see it in ourselves.
I've never heard you swear, Angela.
No, I never have. And I do remember somebody he telling me off who was a Christian because I was blaspheming and saying sort of oh God and oh Christ and all things like this. Like people do. And, uh, and then
The
it,
Irish, the Irish say that quite a lot, actually.
yeah,
They say, "Oh Jesus, Mother of
yeah.
God," and yeah, we don't see
But
it as blaspheming, do
no,
we?
but I think I did. I think I did then. I don't think I said the other words, but I'm not sure.
Oh
I may have
dear,
done. But let's get back
you're
to
changed. You're a changed woman now.
yeah. But anyway, that was my starting, how I started
And
with it.
it was almost like a chance overhearing of a conversation that just turned things
Yeah.
around, wasn't it? That is an amazing and very, very powerful story.
Yes, it's taught me quite a lot. Sometimes we could try so hard, and yet um, it's people seeing what it means to us and that it's real to us.
Exactly. Exactly. I think these personal stories mean so much more
Yeah,
and explain so much more than just preaching.
yeah, definitely.
So, how easy, Angela, was it to draw on your personal experiences when you were writing the book? And were others quite willing to share their own stories with you?
Well, I've got to be honest. I've shared very little of other people's stories, and I guess partly this was because I had so many of my own.
Hmm.
And I did use a few stories, but I made sure they were from people who were no longer with me, people that had died, and then I changed their names anyway. So I only really brought in stories from the past. But I did ask friends for tips, suggestions, and ideas, and some of which I used.
Hmm.
So I did involve people in the book.
Okay.
But I was always a bit wary of if I produced a story that somebody had told me and it wasn't something I'd experienced, that of how accurate it was.
Right.
Oh, I don't know if this makes sense to you. I share stories of people, but they were stories that come from my own experience with them. Um,
Right.
but anyway, I have shared many of my stories on videos and done
Hmm.
sermons for a number of years. So it wasn't really a problem of sharing in the book because I had shared publicly.
Hmm.
But I'm going to be really honest, I'm finding it much harder with my new book because it deals with some very difficult times in my life and issues that I cannot be open about
Hmm.
for various reasons because I would not want it. I would not
Hmm.
want people to be reading and that may be involved in some way. It's very difficult. So I write about childhood of my childhood, and I write about childhood trauma and mental problems. But I've
Right.
had to really
Right.
not go into details. So
Right.
I don't think there was anything though in Read, Play, Reflect that caused me
Mm.
um, to have concern.
Right. Right. But it may, yeah, as you say, this other book in the pipeline is going
Yes,
to be quite different.
yeah.
So what can you reveal to us as the
Well,
listeners before the book?
thank you for asking. Yes, in a way, it's quite different, but the style is very much is the same, very similar. I, I'm really very busy in quite a lot of areas of my life, but I'm still keep picking up, sort of getting down to the notes and scribbling notes and writing this new book, and it's called Look, Listen, and Learn as You Journey with God.
Hmm?
It was going to be Look, Listen, Learn, but there was a lot of books called Look, Listen, and Learn, all to do with playing musical instruments on
Ah,
Amazon. I couldn't
okay.
see the connection, but I thought I thought I ought to make it clear up front that it's no connection with that series. But it could also be called God Speaks because it's about looking round, listening to God speaking in every situation of our lives and all the places where we are and every experience. And it's looking and learning lessons. I try and encourage the reader to understand how God speaks to them and how he's always communicated with us, what the Bible has to say about it. And I have stressed right at the beginning of the book how the Bible and the the personal word, that's the word in our hearts that we feel God is saying, how they both go together. It's not one or the other. They should complement each other.
Mhm.
But after this kind of, I suppose you'd say it's theological because it's about God, but it's still trying to be simple. Part at the beginning where I look at some issues like why do we find it difficult to hear God speaking, and do we sometimes hear God speaking, but are like children when we ask them to go and clear their toys or go to bed and they don't want to hear, and It's
Yes.
just really little things like that, and in the introduction, and then going into how people heard from God in the Bible. But after that section, it moves into the much longer autobiographical section, where I take the reader along a journey with me, and I share what I've learned, what I'm still learning, and it's got the same purpose in a way as Pray We Reflect, which is to encourage the reader not just to think about my experiences, although I share loads of experiences, and a lot of them, thankfully, quite positive. But it encourages the reader to look at their own life and ask themselves questions. What is God saying to me? Where was God with me in that experience? What has it taught me now? What about looking around me? What am I involved with? Work, hobbies, relaxation, our pets, anything. It's kind of like God speaks in the here and now, and also sort of what are we learning that's to help us in the future. So it's kind of a reflected upon, looking back, looking around us, and say looking into the future. And yeah, that's why I've called it Look, Listen and Learn. It's look around at everything,
Yes.
all your experiences. Listen for what you feel God is saying to you in it, and then don't ignore. Learn from what you feel that He's been saying to you, teaching you. That's it.
That's great. I think, the first book that you've written could obviously be very good for people to discuss in groups. And it sounds like your new book as well. It's got lots and lots of questions, lots of
Yeah.
things to think about, and people can reflect on that on their own or in group discussions as well.
Yeah, they could. It's probably a bit more suited for individual ones, a little bit more, but it could be used in both.
Mm-hmm. Really, really looking forward to that. Of course, we met before the book, or we haven't met face to face, unfortunately. We've met on the
Yeah.
wonderful social media. But really, the last time we met, we were talking a lot about your other interest at the Swindon Dog Dancing School. And I know that back in April 2022, your membership numbers had taken quite a hit because of the COVID epidemic. So are you still involved in the dancing school? And if so, are the numbers of people increasing again?
Well, it did temporarily increase after COVID, with quite a few puppies coming along, where we introduced a puppy class and more obedience. But it's slowed down now, but it's never really picked up to what it was. Numbers are still small, but I'm not discouraged. I'm encouraged by the progress that those that have come are making, particularly as the one or two that have come in have been people that have had disabilities or problems. In one case, in a person with us that was paralyzed on one side and also had memory problems, and someone else in a wheelchair. So I've been very encouraged by being able to help them, and rescue dogs that they've had, that I've seen such a
Mhm.
great improvement. So I'm thrilled because of the progress that I've seen though it's a small number. And we've also introduced something called rally obedience, which is a little bit like agility, but and
Okay.
obedience mixed together. And so we have tried some sort of new things, but it isn't all about the numbers. It's really, I think, about the quality of the relationships that we form too with one another. The way I like to feel I'm sharing my faith, even if it's in just a way of praying for people, because I've had a couple of people who have had quite serious operations, cancer, things like that I'm
Right.
still in contact with,
Right.
even though they're not coming to the club. So
And
it
does the club meet once a week, Angela?
it meets. I have an afternoon session, and I have two evening sessions on a Friday.
Okay. And you've got a Facebook page for that as well, don't you?
Yeah,
Swindon
yeah,
Dog Dancing
yeah,
School.
yeah.
And maybe you might, have some events coming up, or, with
Well,
the summer upon us, is there anything coming up that maybe we'll see a few more people?
Well, if anybody wants to have a look at, three of our members have entered a video online competition on video dogs. but I think they've got to join it to see their videos.
Right.
That's a video, but we're waiting for the results of those.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they've all entered the absolute beginners. Very disappointed because two people that had both practiced really hard were not able to take part because one of them had quite a nasty accident and the other one's circumstances changed with her carers and she was no longer able to continue coming. And there was another two people were going to do it, but felt they didn't have time. So that's been a bit disappointing. But but three of our members have produced really good videos for that.
These are not related to the obedience, are they?
No, this is He'll Work to Music.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having a break for the summer in the beginning of August for the August month. And then in September, I'm hoping we could do some kind of party or social and also an introduction evening for anybody that wants to join, because I've not been promoting it very much over the past few weeks because I've known that we've got the summer coming up and I'm going to sort of advertise during the summer for people to come in September.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So what's next for you, Angela?
Well, apart from continuing to try and promote Play, Read, Reflect and writing my new book, I've just started leading an Alpha course at my local church, and I'm excited to be doing that, even though the numbers are small. It's still an encouraging. And what I'm really encouraged about is I've also been asked to do a short thoughtful a week every alternate Sunday on a local radio station. And I've done 2 talks so far, and I'm really pleased about that opportunity. And I'm preaching at my local church again on the first Sunday in August, a bit less preaching than I did before, but that suits me fine because there's so much going on. So that's basically what's happening. But as I said about the dog club, I'm hoping that will resume in September and we'll go from then.
Wow. You're a busy lady, Angela, and it's been lovely to have you back on the podcast telling us about your book. Wonderful.
And probably, Jenny, a second cataract operation on the other eye.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Well, then you'll be able to have perfect vision and read your book.
I think it's going to be a late autumn holiday if there is one this year.
Oh, well, you definitely deserve a holiday. So thank you very, very much for coming on the podcast and great.